Welcome to Al Bernstein Unplugged Unboxing. In a 40-year Hall of Fame career, Al has chronicled some of the greatest moments in boxing history. On this podcast, you get to hear him expand on those memories and talk about the current news in the sport of boxing. You also hear Al interview some of the biggest names in the sport. Here's Al Bernstein Unplugged.
Hi, everybody, and welcome to this episode. I think it's going to be a very special one because, among other things, we have as our guest the great Nonito Donaire. Nonito, of course, a champion in 4 different weight divisions, and now at age 38, still fighting for a vacant world title on December 19th on a fight that I will be doing on Showtime against Emmanuel Rodriguez. Of course, he's coming off that great performance against Nonito Donaire, in which he was just scintillating, even in losing. It was perhaps the fight of the year for 2019, and just an amazing effort by Nonito Donaire. We're going to get a chance to talk to him, and of course, we're going to answer all your questions. And to help me do that and chat about the world of boxing, my co-host, Mr. Trip Mitchell. Trip, how you doing?
I'm doing great, and I remember back, you had me do a Nonito Donaire fight a number of years ago at the Hard Rock, where Andre Ward kind of shadowed and got a chance to realize that he is going to be a great boxing commentator. But Donaire is literally one of the nicest, smartest guys in the sport.
Yeah, if you don't like Nonito Donaire, then you just don't like anybody, because he is a great guy. And that comes across in the interview that, that he did with me. If you've not heard Nonito in an extended interview format, you'll come away feeling just what Tripp said. He's just an excellent man, and has had an interesting career, that's for sure. But some ups, some downs, but mostly ups, and it's certainly a Hall of Fame career, to be sure.
Well, one of the divisions now that seems to be just in the forefront are the welterweights.
Yeah, and of course we're not too far removed from Errol Spence showing us against Danny Garcia that he is not in any way damaged by the car accident that he had, and he performed extraordinarily well in beating Danny Garcia, who himself is an excellent fighter. And Errol Spence announced that, yes, I'm here where I was before as one of the top pound-for-pound fighters in the sport, and certainly one of the top welterweights in the world. And here's where now, we are left. I'm not one of those people that, is given to hyperbole, or is a person that talks about the sky falling if a certain match doesn't happen in boxing. But I think boxing is going to be at an inflection point in 2020. Right after the Spence-Garcia fight, Ken Aioli, the fine columnist for Yahoo, wrote about the fact that boxing needs to make big fights, and the biggest that it needs to make is Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. And I really believe that at this juncture, and this is in no way to denigrate Sean Porter, former guest here in this show, who is a fantastic welterweight, and in my opinion is right there with both Crawford and Spence. He fought Spence to a standstill and could have gotten that decision, and one would assume he would be very competitive against Terence Crawford. So I think Sean Porter's right there with them. But Crawford and Spence are the 2 welterweights that fans want to see in the ring. They have not seen them in the ring. Terence Crawford, because they haven't been available to him, has not been able to fight the cream of the welterweight division. The Thurmans, Garcias, Porters, Urdinas Ugas, Manny Pacquiao, Spence. And so we haven't seen that, and we want to. All boxing fans do, and mostly boxing fans want to see Crawford against Spence. And I believe that it's very important for that fight to be made in 2021. For the same reason it was important for Manny Pacquiao and Floyd Mayweather to be made, and why it hurt the sport that it wasn't made for so long. Because what happens is the mainstream sports media picks on that main fight that isn't being made and picks at it like a festering scab to say this is why boxing is not a great sport, because they're not making fights that matter, when in fact they may be making other fights that matter, but not the one that is on top of mind of everyone, including the media. And that is one of the main reasons why Spence and Crawford needs to be made, and because the fans want to see it. And, you know, I'm not going to be a nostalgic kind of guy and say, well, you know, it's like in the old days when they did it with Hagler, Leonard, Hearns, and Durant. They did, but forget that for a moment. They need to make the fight just because they need to make the fight. And it does do the sport well to make those kind of matches. So I hope that can get made. I know there are problems with networks, promoters, and other things. But, you know, they were able to get the Fury Wilder fight made with essentially similar personnel involved. And I believe it's important to make the Spence Crawford fight. All right, let's start with our questions.
But first of all, I just have to say that you are a wordsmith. There's no question. The Festering Scabs would be the greatest name ever for a punk rock band.
Yeah, exactly. That was a little graphic, wasn't it? Okay.
Well, I don't know, but speaking of the welterweights, our question from RL Malprika: if you had to compare Errol Spence Jr. to a fighter from the past, who would it be?
Oh, it's a good question. You know, look, it would have to be somebody lefty. It would have to be somebody who had a terrific jab, somebody who was a good body puncher, somebody who had high volume as part of their attack. And if I think back to somebody that fits all that description, it's a great, marvelous Marvin Hagler. Now, who of course fought at the middleweight division, just above where Errol Spence fights. And, you know, Errol Spence hasn't yet attained the status of Marvin Hagler, though certainly he's one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in boxing today. Where he gets to ultimately on a plateau of greatness, we don't know. But clearly, Hagler reminds me, or Errol Spence reminds me of Marvin Hagler. And there's also the fact that they are laser focused when they get into a fight. And it's that kind of focus and that kind of competitiveness that allows them to win. So that would be the comparison I would make. We are going to chat now. We'll show you the interview that I did with Nonito Donaire. Nonito is fighting on December 19th against Emmanuel Rodriguez for a vacant Bantamweight title, as he's moved down to Bantamweight, which is very rare for a fighter who, at his age, he's now 38. And I'll be thrilled to call his fight on Showtime. And here's our chat with Nonito Donaire. Nonito, your performance against Naoya Inoue was nothing short of a revelation. You did not win the fight, but you did everything but win the fight and put yourself back on the boxing map in a huge way. You look like a rejuvenated fighter. Were you?
I felt very good going to that fight. And as well as I think it was just the motivation. You know, there's a lot of motivation going into that fight, and just when you are inspired, you know, you can move mountains. It's just kind of that thing.
You were, it wasn't, you know, the performance in that fight was remarkable on many levels. One was the fact that you were able to sustain against somebody who is thought of as one of the most powerful punchers in the lower weight division. And your skill set was so excellent in that fight. So you had two things going at the same time that were pretty remarkable to fans.
You know, again, you know, we really focused on just putting out the best of everything, from speed and power, you know, and just very confident going into that fight. And the thing about it is I've been doing this for quite some time, so the confidence level for me and fear factor is not there when it comes down to being inside that ring. It's my home for me.
Well, you've had a remarkable career. Now you have a chance on December 19th against Rodriguez to win another world title at age 38. What would that mean to win yet another title at this point in your career?
I mean, I've had a lot of titles, so that would be a great blessing. But there is uh, a journey that I'm going into, and that is becoming the undisputed champion of the world. And fighting against Inoue again. That's the goal for my last hurrah.
How have you been able to? You've had a career that's had a kind of amazing periods, and then you had a little lull. You've had a few little setbacks. How have you been able to sustain over all that time to still come back and each time that you've had some setbacks, you've come back from them?
Ultimately, it's just being healthy and being disciplined when it comes down to a lot of things, eating the right food, training constantly, even if I didn't have anything, just mentally preparing myself and just mentally in good health, overall when, the ups and downs, which is the motivation of things. And ultimately it showed in the last fight and in this tournament or that tournament, the WBSS, um, how much I still have in the game, and it all depends on how inspired I am in training, and my mental capacity or my mental health is in the right track. um, you know I I'm more actually, I feel a lot better going into this fight now because of what that last fight had taught me.
Yeah, well, you got to feel confident after the way you performed. Now, you were supposed to fight Nordine Ubali, an excellent fighter who was a champion, and now it's going to be for a vacant title against Emmanuel Rodriguez. What did that change in opponent do for you in terms of your preparation for this fight?
It's been very, very difficult in terms of just preparing for all of it. It's because of COVID, and
Yeah.
there's been numerous gyms that I went to have closed down, because someone has contracted the COVID or got the COVID. And just finding the sparrings and all that stuff that I can control, and not everyone's willing to follow the rules of, like, I'm not going out. I want to go out, they want to go out.
Sure.
So I had to come up with just a step to allow myself to be confident that I'm not going to test positive, and I'm getting the right work, from everybody else. But ultimately, again, experience will come into this. But the main thing right now for me that I am 100% in as a weapon for me is just my mental health, and where I am mentally in confidence for this fight is my biggest key.
How is Rodriguez different in your mind than Ubali in terms of what you have to prepare for?
Well, it was completely different. I mean, it's
Different style.
sidetracked me. Different style, different height, just everything for me, and I had to just switch everything up mentally, because that's the most difficult thing that people don't understand, or fans don't understand, is that when you change the opponent, you have to change everything else. From the sparrings to techniques, and strategy and all of that stuff. So we had to revamp everything and go from there. But again, just the confidence level and the experience that I have just allowed me to just go with the flow.
You got your career start on Showtime on Showbox, and your biggest coming out moment, which I was privileged to announce, was the fight in which you beat Vic Darchinyan. It was the knockout of the year. It was the upset of the year back in 2007. You shocked the world. That moment, I know, still must be etched in your brain as something extraordinarily special.
Well, definitely, you can never forget the first time around, and the way it just elevated me a man, as a person, as a fighter, you know, it's there. And I remember you guys doing that, and that is never ever gonna leave the memory. You know, it was fantastic. It was amazing.
Yeah, it was pretty extraordinary. And, you know, many of us watching you perform, and even though Darchinian at that time was thought of as almost invincible by many people, there were a lot of us that felt that you had a shot to win that fight, even though you were clearly the underdog. Did you sense that some of the boxing pundits were kind of thinking that you had a shot at that?
I mean, there was a big surprise, but a lot of them have said that it
Some
was,
were surprised, yeah.
yeah, you know, but the majority were very skeptical about my
Yeah,
capability. I mean, you're talking to a guy who was, I think he was 28 and 0 with 24
yeah,
knockouts or something like that, and you know, and he has defeated my older brother right there
that's right.
before that. So um, you know, there was just a lot of things going on for me, but I think that, you know, it depends on the personality of a person. My personality was, I was even more eager and more excited for it, and just the fear left me because of the fact that I only have one uh, thing to do, and that was to win and knock this guy out. And that was, I can still remember that emotion.
Yeah, you did it, and it was an extraordinary evening for sure, and it launched you on the way to an excellent career. So here you are now, again at age 38, still fighting exceptionally well. How much longer do we think that Nonito Donaire will continue on in boxing?
I mean, I, again, you know, going back into it, I am very healthy. I take care of myself really well. You know, I don't go out there and drink and party and all of that stuff. I'm just pretty much a family person. I play with my kids all the time. I'm hanging out with my kids all the time. You know, so I'm a homebody when it comes down to that.
Yeah.
But I do take care of myself really well, and I can do this for a very, very long time. But you know, it's just, for me, it's just a matter of how inspired I am. You know, my only goal right now is to capture all of the things, because I've captured everything else, accolades in boxing, from knockout of the year, fighter of the year, um, multiple division champion, multiple world champion, unified champion. The only thing that I have not acquired in the accolades that I seek to accomplish is becoming undisputed, and that's something that I am looking forward to aiming for 2021.
And you did a remarkable thing at your age, coming down in weight. You've gone down to a weight that you hadn't fought at in a long, long time. That was, which I think has probably contributed to your recent success. How hard has that been?
Actually, it was very easy for me to make the weight. I've always been the smaller person. I just always had, you know, kind of figuring out that this is a better option for me to fighting bigger guys, more monetary value here, you know, and more challenges here. So I've gone up in weight, up and down in weight. And then when I was given that opportunity, you know, by Richard Schaefer, he just kind of said that, are you willing to, are you able to go down to 118? I'm
Yeah.
like, that's not a problem. You know. And right off then, you know, it was easy. And I actually, the last fight, I've weighed in at 116, and people
Wow.
were wondering why I was walking around weighing in and drinking water, you know, because I weighed in at 116. So I know
Amazing.
that I could even make it at 115 if I want to.
Wow.
You know, so.
That's actually pretty extraordinary. Obviously, you want to win on December 19th, and you're looking to unify. What do you think when people look back at Nonito Donaire and what has been a remarkable career? What do you think they'll say your legacy was?
Well, you know, I not much of a legacy person, or thinking about any of that, but I just hope that he was the guy who represented boxing well. You know, he was the guy who respected the sports well. He was the guy who loved the sports well, and he was the guy that fought everybody. You know, I want to be remembered as that, because boxing is gentleman's sports. It's a beautiful sport, and it shouldn't be talked down by people who tries to devalue the game by talking all this crap, or by putting on a show, when boxing in itself is a gentleman's sport. Yes, I do believe that boxing has to change in ways to get it out there in the people's eyes. But me as a person, as an old school type of fighter in my mentality, boxing to me is a gentleman's sport that when we can kill each other inside that ring, but at the end of it all, when you need help, at the end of it all, when the fight is done, when you need help and I can help you in ways, I will be there to grab your hand, help you financially or whatever it may be. I'm just this is just you're clashing with swords in that way, putting your life in the line and sharing that emotion, and I believe that that's the important things, and I love the boxing world for that, and I'm gonna be there for the guys that I fought and even the guys that are coming up, and that's just how I want to be as a person who loves the sport with all his heart.
Very well put. And I think that encapsulates probably the way people will look at you, because they have seen you comport yourself in boxing over a long period of time in an excellent fashion. Nonito, I really appreciate you visiting with me. I'm excited that I'm going to get to announce one of your fights again. It's been a little bit of a
Yes.
while.
Yes, and hope there's more to come, Al. I love you guys. You guys are amazing, and this is gonna be very exciting for me as well.
We're very happy that you're going to be on board, and look forward to December 19th. Take care.
Thank you. You too. Take care and be safe out there.
Yep. So, as Tripp aptly pointed out, Nonito Donaire, quite a gentleman and quite a fine fellow in every sense of the word, and I think that was demonstrated in that interview. And he's very thoughtful also about his career and about what he has achieved, what he still wants to achieve. Obviously, his big goal is to unify the world titles in the Bantamweight division. We'll see if he can do that. Well, as we mentioned before, you send us your questions, and Tripp, you are the keeper of the questions. What other questions do we have that are unanswered?
Okay, well, there are a lot, but on this show, at least, we're going to start with Mike Hunt asked the questions. Was Castillo Corrales the greatest fight you've ever called?
Yes, indeed. Jose Luis Castillo and Diego Corrales, no question, it was the best fight I ever called. And I did Hagler Hearns, but the reason I would put Castillo Corrales over that is it was Hagler Hearns times 3, because it went 9.5 rounds, longer than Hagler Hearns did. It was a fight that most boxing fans thought would be good, but it didn't resonate as a ticket seller. There were only about 5,000 fans in the Mandalay Bay Event Center in Las Vegas to see this fight. But by the time the fight got going, they sounded like 15,000 because the action was so amazing. We thought that Diego Corrales might box in this fight. He had employed that in his previous fight, working with trainer Joe Goosen, and had looked superb in doing it. Instead, he decided to engage with Castillo. They stood in front of each other and fought as if they were both in a phone booth for 9+ rounds, both giving as good as they took. And while it was a wildly exciting fight that you could term a brawl, it wasn't a brawl. It was a highly skilled affair in which both men showed not only grit and courage, but also a great skill level. In the 10th round, of course, Castillo knocked down Corrales twice. Corrales was able to get up, but it looked for all the world like this fight was going to go to Jose Luis Castillo until Corrales landed a really good right hand that turned everything around, and Castillo ultimately would be stopped with against the ropes, defenseless, and the referee, Tony Weeks, would come in and stop the fight. And Corrales came away with a great win. And yes, it was the greatest fight that I ever announced, and maybe the greatest lightweight championship match that was ever held.
After a fight like that, did you know right away it was in one of your best you've ever called?
Yeah, I think right away afterwards you felt that it was so extraordinary. And, I've announced so many boxing matches and there have been so many exciting fights. So it's kind of hard sometimes to pejoratively say something's the best. It's like deciding who's the best, movie you've ever seen or whatever. But in this case, you knew it was true.
And you mentioned that it was at Mandalay Bay, which is different. It's both owned by MGM Grand, but of all the places that you've announced in Vegas, do you have a favorite?
I like the Mandalay Bay, actually, of the bigger arenas. I like it a little better than the MGM. There's something that makes it feel a little bit more intimate. One of the great locations for boxing at the former Hard Rock was the Joint. Of course, now that hotel is becoming a different brand, but the Joint was a smaller venue that there was a lot of great boxing matches at the Joint.
Yeah, Nonito Donaire fight that we were just talking about was there, and that was a lot of fun. And the Hilton was crazy many years.
Yeah, that was a great location as well.
So, as we get to more questions, I've got to put on the keeper of the question glasses, which is frankly horrible. Let's talk about the big fella. Who would Fundora, the giant welterweight, fight next?
Yeah, Sebastian Fundora, who was the super welterweight 154-pounder, who just won on the undercard of Spence and Garcia. That weight division is so filled with great fighters. Jarrett Hurd, J. Rock Williams, Erickson Lubin, Tony Harrison, obviously Jermel Charlo, Brian Castano. The list goes on and on and on. There are so many great fighters in that weight division. One of the fights that I would really love to see, and I just mentioned him last, was Brian Castano, who I think, Arslan Lara also, who Castano fought, another 154-pounder, is terrific. I would really be curious to see Fundora in against Castano. That would be the kind of match that I think would tell us whether Fundora could face some of those top 154-pounders. I don't know that that's a fight they're planning on making, but I do think that one would be a good one. And whoever they have him in against next, I think it would be great to put him in against the top contender. Now, he's only 22 years of age, so they don't want to rush him, but he's ready, I think, for those kind of challenges.
What do you think weight class ultimately he will be the most successful at?
Well, he'll probably get up to middleweight for sure because he's so tall. How far he'll get beyond that, I'm not sure. But he says he can fight at 154 for a while, so we'll see.
Okay, minute bowl of boxing here.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got a fun question from Doc Bluff. I'd love to know about some of the large wagers you made on matches throughout the years.
Well, number one, I made it a rule that I would never bet on a fight I announced, except I broke that rule once. When I was doing early in my career, Gene Hatcher was fighting Johnny Bumpus. It was a championship fight on the undercard of Ray Mancini and Livingstone Bramble. It was a syndicated show that I was doing. And I just felt Gene Hatcher was a fairly significant underdog to Johnny Bumpus. And I had done a lot of Gene Hatcher's fights on the Top Rank Boxing Series. And Johnny Bumpus is a terrific boxer, but I felt Gene Hatcher would beat him. And I placed a wager on it, even though I was announcing the fight. Well, the fight was going on, and Johnny Bumpus, who was a terrific boxer, was outboxing Gene Hatcher, which I kind of expected to happen for a lot of the fight, but I felt like Gene Hatcher would get to him. Well, the rounds kept piling up, and he wasn't getting to Johnny Bumpus. And while I'm announcing the fight, in the back of my mind, I'm remembering the wager I made. Finally, in the later rounds, Gene Hatcher did get to Johnny Bumpus, and he did knock him out. And I won the bet, and it further reinforced. And from that point on, I never bet on a fight that I announced. And part of it was because I remembered that awful feeling of trying to concentrate on announcing the fight, also making sure I was unbiased, and worrying about how my bet was going. Now, as far as a large wager, I don't wager that much to begin with. But on boxing, the biggest wager I ever made was one. I bet $1,000, which is a lot of money for betting if you don't bet. And I bet on Jerry Cooney to beat George Foreman. And the reason I did that was because Gil Clancy, who was a great broadcaster and great trainer, my mentor in the sport of boxing, who was at that point training Jerry Cooney, had always told me, the one weakness that George Foreman had is that if you were a tall left-hander and you had a great left hook, you'd have a great chance of beating George Foreman. Well, Jerry Cooney fit that bill exactly. And when I was talking to Gil Clancy while he was training Jerry Cooney, he said, Jerry looks fantastic. He said, we're going to win this fight. So I said, okay. So I went and made that bet. And in round one, Jerry Cooney did hurt George Foreman badly with the left hook. And George told me later it was one of the hardest punches he'd ever been hit with. And he thought, oh boy, I've got to get this guy out of here or I'm going to get knocked out. And sure enough, a round later, he knocked out Jerry Cooney and my $1,000 went down the drain with it. So that was my largest and most inappropriate wager. And since then, I have to be honest, I've never wagered that amount and I don't bet too often.
Well, you're a married man, so those wagers are out the door.
Yeah, no, you don't want to be making those bets when you're married. Too much to explain. You knew George Foreman
throughout George Foreman's career. Why do you attribute the fact that he became really a different guy, just kind of a wonderful guy later on in his years?
Well, I think that the young George Foreman had the same sense of humor as the older George Foreman. I actually think it was how the media perceived him. Yeah, well, for one thing, he looked up to Sonny Liston. And he knew Sonny Liston. And so some of that gruff exterior might have been his way of emulating Sonny Liston. But I don't ever think that George Foreman was really, I think the media kind of, he did things to contribute to it in terms of the way he idolized Liston. But there was still a great sense of humor in the young George Foreman from everyone that I've talked to as there was in the old George Foreman. But he kind of allowed himself to be that guy more regularly or more often as he got a little bit older.
Well, and one of the richest boxers ever, thanks to the George Foreman grill.
Yes, that's for sure.
Well, how about the Al Bernstein grill? How did that work out?
I don't think that's ever been marketed well.
Okay. We've got a little switch up. Talking about music, Tommy D's asked, who is the Muhammad Ali of male vocalists and the Lucia Riker of female vocalists?
Okay. Tommy, by the way, a great sports writer down in Alabama, terrific guy who knows all about all sports, including boxing, and he's a big music lover. So, and he has, I think Tommy has seen me perform up in Las Vegas once or twice. I'm not sure, but anyway, so yeah, this is one of those subjective kind of things that everybody has different lists. I'm not going to pick one. I'm going to pick three. So for the Lucia Riker part, I'm going to say I'm going to pick from three different genres. Ella Fitzgerald, the great jazz singer of years gone by. Barbra Streisand, who I think has the most amazing instrument. And Ann Wilson, the great rock singer of Heart, who I think is the best rock singer of all time. So I would pick her. Wow. And again, this is totally subjective, so everybody has their own list. And by the way, if you see this and you want to chime in with your list, send it to us on Twitter at Al Bernstein, and I'll be happy to look at it. For the Muhammad Ali of male vocalists, I'm gonna go with Sammy Davis Jr. as one of those people. Obviously, I like the Great American Songbook, and I like that genre. And I'm going to go with Steve Perry from Journey, who was one of the great, rock singers probably of all time. And for number three, I think I'm going to go with the great Otis Redding, who was one of the great blues artists of all time. So I could name 25 more, but that'll be I'll stick with that. Who's your favorite vocalist, Trip? Who do you like the best?
Well, it's kind of shocking, but I, during my selling T-shirt days, Heart's one of the band we work for, and Ann Wilson is amazing. And a couple years ago, when they did the Led Zeppelin tribute at the Kennedy Center, Ann and Nancy came on with some backing from one of the Foo Fighters and did Stairway to Heaven. And to look at Jimmy Plant and Plant and Page crying during that performance was amazing.
That was one of the great it's a great reference. That's one of the great moments of the Kennedy Center Honors, which is that show is an amazing show every year. That's one of the great moments of the Kennedy Center Honors, and it's one of the great musical moments of all time, period. And you're right, when they cut away to the members of Led Zeppelin, and they were just in awe of what she did. So, yeah, that was pretty amazing.
And then two bands out of Chicago, Styx and REO Speedwagon. Those guys could make, and it's the 70s music. It's classic rock, but hey, what the heck?
No,
we deserve it.
Those are good choices. Yeah, it's very good. And of current artists, I mean, I love a lot of the current artists. So went back and looked at some of them. But the Lady Gagas of the world are pretty amazing. And there are many great artists today. So
who's the best anthem you've ever renditioned at a fight you've covered?
Oh, at a fight, I'm going to say at a fight I've ever covered. Wow, that's a good question. Well, I better. One thing, when my wife sees this, I could be in trouble because her and her sister sang the anthem at the Vinny Pazienza Roy Jones Jr. match. So I better put her at the top of the list if I want to stay married. But there were a lot of great. I'll tell you what. One of the major fights, and I forget which one it was, Whitney Houston sang the anthem. And, of course, we all remember her great anthem at the Super Bowl. Well, the anthem she did in that particular fight was pretty amazing as well.
Have you done the anthem at any fights that you've called?
Not at fights I called. I've done it at some smaller fights and around the United States. Of course, when I'm announcing it, it's hard to get up there and do it and come and sit down. So I haven't actually done that. And as you well know, my son Wes has done the anthem at a number of fights here in Las Vegas. Including a number of the ones that we've had on Showtime. So it's a kind of a family affair.
Well, we want to mention Tom Yankello. He does an amazing job.
Yeah, Tom did a good job with Roy Jones Jr. at his exhibition with Mike Tyson. And Tom has his YouTube channel, World Class Boxing, which is a very good site. If you're an amateur boxer and you are someone who is involved in boxing, you want to go look at those videos because they're very educational. And even if you're just as a boxing fan, you can see in those videos, there's all kinds of things to glean from it. They're about styles and how different fighters fight, and it's a fun site. So go to Tom's World Class Boxing channel on YouTube, and you'll enjoy what you see. Now we have Lennox Lewis coming up our next time on our show, and I think you'll really enjoy the conversation I had with him. We talk a lot about his career and his approach to boxing, and I will say that interviewing Nonito Donaire and then Lennox Lewis, I don't think you can interview two men who are better ambassadors for the sport of boxing, that's for sure. So you'll look forward to hearing from him. Well, my thanks to Nonito for joining us on this show. My thanks, as always, to Tripp for his fine work. And my thanks to you for watching and listening, and also for sending us your questions. And we'll see you next time.